Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna. You're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. World leaders are convening in Germany today for the annual Munich Security Conference. The Kremlin says next round of Ukraine peace talks will take place in Geneva next week. And Trump revokes landmark ruling that greenhouse gas emissions endanger public health. World leaders are arriving in Germany for an annual Munich Security Conference against a backdrop of strained transatlantic ties and ongoing wars. As talks begin, protests are also taking place outside the venue.
The Munich Security Conference opens today, with leaders arriving for 3 days of high-level talks on global crises and defense. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has landed in Germany and is expected to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who is leading Kiev's delegation. Speaking before departure, Rubio signaled the scale of change facing the alliance.
The old world is gone, frankly, the world I grew up in, and we live in a new era in geopolitics, and it's going to require all of us to sort of re-examine what that looks like and what our role is going to be.
His visit comes at a delicate moment for transatlantic relations, after a year of tensions over defense spending and the future direction of NATO. While leaders meet inside, protests are unfolding outside the venue. Several thousand demonstrators gathered to call for democracy in Iran.
We are here to support the Iranian people and the Iranian resistance, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, and the PMOI, the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, to say that the Iranian people do not want any dictatorship, neither the Shah, nor the monarchy, nor the religious dictatorship that currently exists. We are here to demand a democratic and secular republic for the Iranian people.
Greenpeace activists also staged an action in central Munich, hanging a large banner and urging Europe to reduce dependence on imported fossil fuels.
Europe's strength depends on our energy security. The EU is importing more and more fracking gas from the US that is making us vulnerable to pressure from Trump. This is why Greenpeace is taking action today here in Munich, because whenever we're talking about security, we also have to talk about energy sovereignty. Only renewables keep Europe independent.
The conference runs until Sunday, with defense, Ukraine, and the future of the Western alliance high on the agenda.
As European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul arrive at the Munich Security Conference in Germany, von der Leyen said Europe must invest more in its own defence industry, adding that most joint military purchases under a new 800,000 billion euro plan could come from Europe or Ukraine.
For years, we have heard from across the political spectrum, both within our alliance and elsewhere, that Europe must do more for defence, and that is right. Europe must become more independent and do more for its defence. A strong Europe also means a strong NATO, and that is the mindset I have brought to the European Union. Last year, we did more for defence in Europe than in the previous 10 years.
We had years, decades of complaints by the US about the fact that in Europe we were not spending enough on defence. That has changed with the summit in The Hague. The shift in mindset is that yesterday in the room what we felt, all of us, and there was a clear coming together of vision and of unity, is Europe really stepping up. Europe taking more of a leadership role within NATO. Europe also taking more care of its own defence, and this is really a staggering change, and this will make NATO stronger, because it means that a strong Europe in a strong NATO means that the transatlantic bond will be stronger than ever, because we have dealt with that big irritant on the US side of Europe not doing the same as the Americans were doing.
Now we're joined by our Deputy Editor-in-Chief Orkan Amashov, who's on the ground at the Munich Security Conference. Orkan is joining us now with the latest developments. Orkan, good to have you with us.
Hello, Dilek. Very good afternoon to you from Munich.
Can you talk us through what's happening there, Orkan? What are some of the key discussions and latest developments coming out of the conference?
Yes, the 3-day Munich Security Conference has kicked off today. It's going to last until Sunday afternoon, Sunday early evening. The major theme here is very much based on the report published by Munich Security Conference known as Under Destruction, which is about the global affairs as wrecking ball, looking at it from all sorts of angles. But fundamentally, of course, the rupture. Transatlantic Alliance is facing one of its major crises in living memory, and that was initially mentioned during his opening remarks by the president of the Munich Security Conference. I'm joining you from this cockpit of the geopolitical diplomacy, and the atmosphere here is very, very electric, and everything's very condensed. Unlike many other congregations like Davos Economic Forum and also other United Nations General Assembly, which does have a very wide. Here, everything's incredibly condensed, and everything, of course, is happening in the beating heart of Munich Security Conference, the Hotel Bayerischer Hof, where the dignitaries are coming in and coming out. Today's key focus was on the opening remarks of the president, and of course, J.D. Vance, US Vice President, is not here, and everybody's talking about the major speech that is going to be delivered by Marco Rubio, US State Secretary, and to what extent that very speech that he's going to deliver will be different to the speech delivered by US Vice President. Because, well, you remember, in the history of this congregation, which was established back in 1963, there have been many important historic speeches. Naturally, a speech by Vladimir Putin back in 2007 was one of those defining moments, and what is happening today between Russia and the European Union and European countries are largely understood in the context of what happened back in 2007, because the strategic signaling was made back then. Another very important point, I think, was made about China. European countries are expecting China to play a more proactive role in terms of limiting Russia's actions on the ground in Ukraine. But a central matter here is, of course, US delegation. A number of representatives from US Senate are here, led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and everybody is confidently expecting the speech to be by the delegation. President Aliyev of Azerbaijan arrived this afternoon. He already had a couple of very important meetings, including the meeting with the head of the Kurdish regional government of Iraq, and many important meetings. And also panel discussion involving President Aliyev is expected to take place tomorrow.
Orkan, thank you so much for the roundup there, and we'll talk to you again, no doubt, later in the evening up until Sunday afternoon. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
The Kremlin says a new round of peace talks between Russia and Ukraine will take place in Geneva on the 17th and 18th of February. According to Russian news agencies, citing Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, the negotiations will be held in a trilateral format with participation from the United States. The Russian delegation will be headed by Kremlin aide Vladimir Medinsky. Moscow has formally appointed Medinsky to lead its delegation at the upcoming talks as diplomatic efforts to address the conflict continue. At least 9 people have been killed and 28 others injured in Russian attacks across Ukraine over the past 24 hours, according to regional authorities. Overnight, Moscow launched a ballistic missile and more than 150 drones, with several strikes getting through air defences and hitting multiple locations. In Odessa region, 1 person was killed and 6 were wounded, 3 of them critically, as port, residential and energy facilities were targeted. In Donetsk region, 5 people were killed, including an 8-year-old boy, with more casualties reported in nearby towns. Fatalities and injuries were also recorded in Kharkiv, Kherson, Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions as attacks continued across the country. Kyiv is grappling with winter blackouts again after fresh Russian strikes battered Ukraine's energy network, forcing families to seek heat and food in emergency shelters. As the humanitarian strain grows, President Zelensky says Ukraine remains open to peace talks, but not at the cost of its national interests.
Residents in Kyiv lined up for hot meals after a fresh wave of Russian strikes left parts of the Ukrainian capital without heat, power and water. Overnight, Russia launched drones and ballistic missiles targeting Ukraine's energy system. Officials say tens of thousands of people were affected in Kiev, as well as in the cities of Dnipro and Odessa. In Kiev alone, Mayor Vitaly Klitschko says about 3,500 apartment buildings were without heating. Nearly 2,600 high-rise buildings lost electricity in the latest attack, adding to more than 1,000 already cut off by earlier strikes.
After the attack, there was no power or heating. Today, I saw a missile being shot down and burning debris flying everywhere. I could even see it from my window.
I have 5 children, 4 of whom are small. Some of them go to kindergarten. They are also at home because kindergartens were closed due to a lack of heating, and it is very cold. So we are all sitting at home. The elevator is not working. There is no water. The washing machine is not working, and there is no heating. That is the whole problem.
Ukraine's private energy company DTEK says more than 100,000 families are without electricity. One of its thermal power plants was also targeted. Meanwhile, in an interview published by The Atlantic on Thursday, Zelensky said Kiev was willing to hold both a presidential election and a referendum on a deal. However, he stressed Ukraine would not accept an agreement that harms its national interests.
In a 2009 scientific finding concerning the danger of greenhouse gas emissions has been repealed by US President Donald Trump. He argues the reversal will benefit America's auto industry by lowering the cost of production and making cars more affordable.
US President Donald Trump has overturned a scientific determination that greenhouse gas emissions pose a threat to human health. The 2009 endangerment finding, introduced during the first year of former President Barack Obama's first term, concluded that a range of greenhouse gases endangered public health. It became the legal foundation for federal efforts to curb emissions, particularly from vehicles. Its repeal removes the legal basis for federal climate regulations, and so Trump announced the termination of federal greenhouse gas emission standards for all vehicles and engines covering model years from 2012 to 2027, arguing the rules have harmed the US auto industry.
Under the process just completed by the EPA, we are officially terminating the so-called endangerment finding, a disastrous Obama-era policy that severely damaged the American auto industry and massively drove up prices for American consumers. That is why, effective immediately, we're repealing the ridiculous endangerment finding and terminating all additional green emission standards imposed unnecessarily on vehicle models and engines between 2012 and 2027 and beyond.
In a post on social media, Obama criticized the move, saying it would make the United States less healthy and less safe. The White House described the reversal as the largest deregulation effort in American history, arguing it would reduce car prices and cut costs for automakers by $2,400 per vehicle. The endangerment finding had enabled the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to act under the Clean Air Act of 1963 to limit emissions of carbon dioxide, methane, and 4 other heat-trapping pollutants from vehicles, power plants, and other industries. Repealing it will eliminate requirements to measure, report, certify, and comply with federal greenhouse gas standards for cars, though the change may not initially extend to stationary sources such as power plants. Environmental groups say the decision represents the most significant climate rollback to date and have indicated they will challenge it in court.
To Gaza now. In a region torn apart by conflict, consequences go wider and deeper than the loss of homes and destruction. A massive wartime garbage dump has overtaken one of Gaza City's oldest commercial districts. International organisations are now stepping in to respond.
This impromptu waste site sits on the former Fras Market, a historic quarter selling items ranging from food to clothes and household tools to around 600,000 people. Rubbish and debris is piled high up to 13 meters because access to the main landfill sites in Gaza are blocked. The dump is said to be fueling serious health and environmental problems and the spread of insects and illnesses.
this situation has been affecting all the people living in Gaza City, especially those living in this neighborhood who have been at risk of health concern, especially during the summer periods. But today is an important day because the first truck started removing the waste from here to a temporary dump site in central Gaza.
While some local residents have been searching the rubbish for items of value, authorities and citizens are looking forward to the area being cleared. After a conflict, the new issue of solid waste build-up is being seen as a major concern. Alistair Burt, a former UK MP and Middle East minister, says. A news spoke exclusively to him.
It stands out as an example of the issues that are going to have to be dealt with in Gaza, and also as a symbol of the extraordinary destruction that has already taken place. Not just the 70,000 lives lost, the maybe 170,000 people injured, but the damage that's done, across Gaza. This will have a health implication, of course.
The UNDP says 570,000 tons of solid waste has been collected and dumped across Gaza since October 2023, and in order to protect public health is moving it to Abu Jarad in the south of the city.
Now we'll take a short break, and when we return we'll unpack the Munich Security Conference and what it revealed about the future of transatlantic security. Stay with us.
I'm Katie Wilson, and A News Talks has a brand new look. In this new episode, we sit down with 3 voices, 3 personal stories, and 3 perspectives that help us understand the world we live in today.
I was really excited, and at the same time, it's a new chapter in my life.
So far, the biggest project that I've gotten myself into.
From academia to real-life experience, A News Talks goes beyond headlines, focusing on people, ideas, and the journeys that shape them.
Not by the role you have, not by the salary you have. That's what I define as a success.
Honest conversations, meaningful dialogue. This is A News Talks, coming soon.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome to Shusha. That spring water comes from the Karabakh Mountains. I'd love to taste it, actually. Woo! That is just amazing. All right, we're in the kitchen here with Etzi Bar. He's the head chef. What are we making today?
Today we will be preparing Shusha rice.
Finally doing something. Come on. 5 more minutes and we'll be eating. Hopefully we can get down there. 4 hours in here, that's been cooking. That is amazing.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. around the globe, and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption. Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. Challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gabala. Hi, Candy. One important note to this. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are recording the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv, Washington, London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing,
Bangkok,
Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan,
Tehran,
Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, for A News.
Welcome back to A News. At the Munich Security Conference, global leaders are confronting growing uncertainty from US-EU tensions to Iran diplomacy and Britain's growing role in Europe's security architecture. With questions over American commitment, strategic autonomy and nuclear negotiations dominating discussions, we ask whether Munich represents alliance, renewal or strategic change. Let's bring in our guest, Qingdou Zhu, a senior fellow at Pangol Institution from Munich, Germany. Welcome to the program, Qingdou.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let's begin with tone. Does this year's Munich conference project unity or expose deeper cracks within the alliance, within NATO?
Well, that's a good question, of course. You know, people are actually for the US, it's really about in what way we tell their European partners we are leaving, either in the harsh way, the Trump's way, or probably in another way, more intellectually, by their Undersecretary of War. A couple of days ago, he gave a speech about, basically explains why we are leaving, or in the words of the U.S. ambassador to NATO, to the European side, that, after 80 years of protection, you grew up, you take care of yourself, you are independent. I think in general, on the European side, they accept now we are on our own. We need to take up this responsibility. It's really about how to do it, and it takes time for them to get used to the new challenge of the new situation.
Okay, and Qingdou, how does the Ukraine war factor into Munich's broader debates about deterrence and NATO cohesion?
Yes, there's a debate about what kind of NATO in the future, in particular the rest of the NATO relationship with the U.S. For the U.S., it's a rebalancing the structure. As I said, it's a new structure of transformation of NATO. It's very different from the previous NATO during this since the unipolar period, since the collapse of former Soviet Union. Is a different one right now. It's more in the U.S. world, partnership, right? Europeans are partners of the U.S. The European business sphere.
Okay. You can hear me okay, Ging-do?
Yes,
Okay.
I can.
Now, Munich often sets the tone for the year in security policy. What narrative is emerging this time?
Well, the tone is really about the multiple issues combined into one. Obviously, it's a big challenge for the European Union. On one hand, they want to relaunch their economy. That, you know, they have these tariffs from Washington. In their own words, they have the competition from the Chinese. And at the same time, there's another challenge that we talked about, NATO. And also, at the same time, they do have, you know, the Ukraine crisis, which is ongoing. In what way that will be ended, and you know, whether they can relegate all the power to Washington to talk to Moscow. You know, there are different voices. Basically, on every issue, there are different voices. You know, it's easy to talk about solidarity, but 27 members, so to reach a universal viewpoint on certain specific is always challenging for the European Union. But anyway, that's the tone. They are on their own. They need to take up the job. They need to face the challenge. They need to invest more in terms of
Okay, Ging-do, that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate your analysis. We'll take a short break now, and when we return, we'll take a look at major stories from the region.
I'm Katie Wilson, and A News Talks has a brand new look. In this new episode, we sit down with three voices, three personal stories, and three perspectives that help us understand the world we live in today.
I was really excited, and at the same time, it's a new chapter in my life.
So far, the biggest project that I've gotten myself into.
From academia to real-life experience, A News Talks goes beyond headlines, focusing on people, ideas, and the journeys that shape them.
Not by the role you have, not by the salary you have. That's what I define as a success.
Honest conversations, meaningful dialogue. This is A News Talks, coming soon.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. The United Nations Security Council has unanimously voted to extend the mandate of the sanctions monitoring team overseeing measures related to Afghanistan, keeping the existing restrictions on Taliban leaders in place for another year. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
The UN Security Council renewed the so-called 1988 sanctions regime, which targets specific individuals and entities linked to the Taliban. The measures include travel bans, asset freezes, and arms embargo provisions imposed on listed members of the movement and associated figures. The monitoring team, which reports to the Security Council, is tasked with assessing the implementation and effectiveness of these sanctions, as well as tracking security political and humanitarian developments across Afghanistan. In a message posted on X, the United Kingdom's mission to the United Nations said that Council had unanimously renewed the 1988 sanctions regime against the Taliban, adding that the authorities in Kabul must take meaningful steps to meet their international obligations, including on counter-terrorism and the protection of the rights of women and girls. During the Council deliberations, Russia emphasized the need to maintain engagement with the Taliban authorities, stressing that dialogue should continue alongside the sanctions measures. The sanctions framework was first introduced in 2011, separating Taliban-related sanctions from those imposed on Al-Qaeda. It has since remained one of the main tools used by the Security Council to pressure Taliban leaders while allowing humanitarian and diplomatic engagement with the Taliban. The extension means the monitoring team will continue its work over the coming year, with regular reports to the Council expected to shape future decisions on sanctions and international engagement with Kabul. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
A major criminal case has been launched in Azerbaijan against several well-known political figures. Authorities say they plotted with foreign intelligence services to overthrow the government.
Azerbaijan's State Security Service says it has uncovered what it calls a coordinated but multi-layered attempt to seize power with foreign involvement. One strand of the case centers on Abbas Abbasov and Rustam Ibrahimbeyov. Investigators say they co-founded an organization abroad in 2012 known as the Union of Russian Azerbaijani Organizations, also referred to as the Union of Billionaires. According to the indictment, the group was created with the support of foreign special service agencies to influence political processes inside Azerbaijan. Prosecutors allege that around the 2013 presidential election, funds amounting to more than 933,000 manats were channeled to mobilize people from different regions for rallies and mass unrest. A separate part of the case focuses on Ali Karimli, chairman of the Azerbaijan Popular Front Party, and party members including Fuad Gahramanli and Ganimat Zaidov. Investigators claim they held secret communications with representatives of a foreign state seeking organizational support to bring Karimli to power. In return, it is alleged that assurances were given that the country would gradually move towards membership of the Collective Security Treaty Organization. Ali Karimli is also accused of attempting to exploit the July 2020 march in Baku, originally held in support of the army, by instructing supporters to create chaos and seize key state buildings. Former senior official Ramiz Mehdiev faces separate charges of treason and money laundering. Authorities say he sent strategic proposals to foreign intelligence representatives in 2025 and legalized more than 17 million manats of criminal proceeds. Several suspects are currently abroad and have been declared wanted.
Russia and Armenia are starting detailed talks on restoring 2 railway sections in Armenia. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Overchuk says the move follows a request from the Armenian side. The lines would connect Armenia's rail network with Azerbaijan near the city of Yerashk and with Turkey near the settlement of Akuryan. The total length of the sections to be restored is about 14 kilometres. Overchuk says the project would give Russia direct rail access to Azerbaijan's Nakhchivan region, to Turkey and Mediterranean ports, and further to Iran, opening routes toward the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean. A bilateral roundtable under the Peace Bridge Initiative will take place in Armenia on February 13th and 14th. Civil society representatives from Armenia and Azerbaijan will meet in Armenia under the Peace Bridge Initiative. The gathering will include core participants and a wider group from both sides. The Azerbaijani delegation entered via a delimited border, completing all procedures. Discussions will cover the Washington Summit Peace Agenda, regional security, economic cooperation, public perceptions, and civil society's role in building trust. This follows previous exchanges, including a roundtable in Yerevan in October and a visit by Armenian civil society to Baku in November. EU and Georgian officials have met in Tbilisi following reports of the bloc's intentions to impose sanctions on Kulevi port. If adopted, the sanctions would prohibit transactions with the oil port on Georgia's Black Sea coast. A news correspondent Nini Nikolashvili has more from Tbilisi, Georgia.
On 12 February, EU Ambassador to Georgia, Pavel Herchinsky, met in Tbilisi with First Deputy Foreign Minister George Zurabashvili. The meeting followed reports suggesting that the Kulevi oil terminal on Georgia's Black Sea coast could be considered under future EU sanctions measures linked to Russia. According to the Georgian Foreign Ministry, the central issue raised by Tbilisi was the potential impact such a step would have on strategic transit infrastructure. Georgian officials stated that no sanctioned vessels have entered the port and that no violations of EU restrictive measures have been recorded. They detailed ongoing compliance efforts, including cargo and maritime monitoring, identification of sanctioned entities, and coordination with European partners to prevent circumvention, including activities linked to Russia's so-called shadow fleet. However, the discussion extended beyond technical compliance. The Georgian side emphasized that Kulevi is part of the broader Caspian Black Sea Europe transport corridor, known as the Middle Corridor, a route that has become increasingly significant since Russia's invasion of Ukraine disrupted the traditional northern transit routes. As trade flows sought alternatives bypassing Russian territory, the Middle Corridor gained geopolitical and economic weight. For Georgia, development of this route is a long-term strategic priority aimed at positioning the country as a regional transit hub connecting Central Asia and Europe. Officials argued that sanctioning infrastructure tied to this corridor could undermine connectivity objectives that also align with Europe's diversification strategy. The sanctions debate comes as the European Union continues work on its 20th package of measures against Russia. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas has stated that discussions, including on maritime services, are still ongoing, stressing that no specific proposals are final until agreed by member states. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Turkey is urging closer cooperation across the Islamic world to strengthen transport links and boost economic growth. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan addressed transport ministers from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, highlighting the role of infrastructure in transforming fast-growing markets into strategic power.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has called for enhanced transport integration among members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or OIC, saying reliable transport networks are essential to unlocking the Islamic world's economic and commercial potential. Erdogan made the remarks in a video message to an OIC transport ministers meeting in Istanbul held on Thursday. He said the Islamic world is known for its young populations and rapidly growing markets, but stressed that these advantages can only be fully realized through modern and integrated transport systems. According to the Turkish president, highways, railways, seaports, and airports must function as a single network to transform economic potential into what he described as strategic power. Erdogan pointed to Turkey's own experience, highlighting major infrastructure investments carried out in recent years. He noted that large-scale projects, such as the Marmaray Rail Tunnel and the Eurasia Tunnel, had already served to bolster the country's rail, maritime, and aviation capacity. The president also reiterated Turkey's continued support for the Trans-Caspian Middle Corridor project, an ambitious east-west connectivity scheme linking China to European markets. Erdogan said Ankara seeks to enhance connectivity among OIC member states by developing cross-border transit corridors and advancing joint infrastructure projects. He asserted that stronger transport links would help expand trade, improve logistics, and deepen economic cooperation across the Islamic world. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation brings together 56 Muslim-majority countries across the Middle East, Asia, and Africa, including both Turkey and Azerbaijan. Together, OIC member states represent a combined population of more than 2 billion people. This is Adam Aro for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
After a short break, we'll discuss the treason charges announced by Azerbaijan's State Security Service and what they may mean for the country's political and legal landscape. Stay with us.
Welcome to Shusha. That spring water comes from the Karabakh Mountains. I'd love to taste it, actually. Woo! That is just amazing. All right, we're in the kitchen here with Etsi Bar. He's the head chef. What are we making today?
Today we will be preparing Shusha rice.
Finally doing something. Etsi Bar, come on. 5 more minutes and we'll be eating. Hopefully we can get down there. 4 hours in here, that's been cooking. That is amazing.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
I'm Katie Wilson, and A News Talks has a brand new look. In this new episode, we sit down with 3 voices, 3 personal stories, and 3 perspectives that help us understand the world we live in today.
I was really excited, and at the same time, it's a new chapter in my life.
So far, the biggest project that I've gotten myself into.
From academia to real-life experience, A News Talks goes beyond headlines, focusing on people, ideas, and the journeys that shape them.
Not by the role you have, not by the salary you have. That's what I define as a success.
Honest conversations, meaningful dialogue. This is A News Talks, coming soon.
Welcome back to A News. Azerbaijan's State Security Service has announced the filing of an indictment against a group accused of attempting to forcibly seize state power with alleged foreign backing. The case includes charges of treason and efforts to undermine the constitutional order, raising significant legal questions. Now, to unpack this story, we're joined by Gaya Mamadov, a Member of Parliament from Azerbaijan, who's joining us from Baku. Welcome, Mr. Mamadov, to the programme.
Good evening.
Now, serious accusations are being raised. Azerbaijan's State Security Service has announced that an indictment has been filed in a case alleging foreign-linked efforts to forcibly seize power and change the constitutional order, including charges under Articles 278.1 and 274 of the Criminal Code. What do you make of these charges?
Well, indeed, the State Security Service of the Republic of Azerbaijan, which is in charge of operational and investigative duties related to threats from attempts to changing constitutional order and counterintelligence. The agency made a quite concise but very detailed report on attempts by certain former officials linked with foreign agencies, involving also some opposition figures, with the aim of changing constitutional order and taking power. And the mentioned articles of the Criminal Code relates exactly to this. I mean, enforceable change of constitutional order and taking power, as well as high treason. One of the officials at the time of those activities, Mr. Mehdiev, namely the former chief of staff, was active duty member of the National Security Council, and colluded at that very moment with foreign intelligence agencies. Of course, this issue has three main dimensions. First one being legal, second one being domestic political, and the third one being geopolitical. All those three are interlinked to each other. As for legal aspects, of course, it is up to the court to make a final judgment, but politically speaking, the fact of collusion among former officials, one deputy prime minister, former chief of staff, and a member of the National Security Council, with head of opposition figure, is evident. The fact of conspiration is there. They were plotting to change the constitutional order. And that's what's striking. All of them, basically, politically speaking, betrayed their own declared ideals. But it is quite disappointing to see that the Azerbaijani citizens actively seeking out to foreign intelligence agencies and plotting with them against their own country.
And without speculating, Mr. Mammadov, on the merits of the case, how should this development be understood in the broader context of Azerbaijan-Russia relations, especially given the timing coming shortly after the visit of J.D. Vance to the region?
Well, the statement by the State Security Service does not specifically mention a name of the country whose intelligence agencies was co-leading with Azerbaijan former officials and opposition figures, but it is clear to everyone. In terms of timing, well, there is a famous saying, everything is related to everything else, more now than before. Timing matters, of course. And if you look at the information by the State Security Service, it seems that it covers quite a lengthy period from 2012 until last year, so over 13 years, and all key events happened in relation to an important geopolitical developments. In 2012, 2013, when the first this Billionaires Club, etc., they tried to conspire against Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan had just joined the non-alignment movement, clearly sending signal that it doesn't wish to join any military alliance, be it NATO or CSTO. Apparently, some circles abroad was not happy about it and trying to make pressure on Azerbaijan to change its foreign policy course. It failed back then. And then the second episode is related to pre-war developments in Azerbaijan in 2020. Apparently, if we take everything in context, there was a unprovoked attack by Armenia on Azerbaijan in July, which led to the death of a popular general. And then apparently it was all linked to each other, creating some sort of tension. And of course, sabotaging Azerbaijan's ability to resist even larger provocation by Armenia that started in September. And then last year, that's even more telling. It happened quite short after the president of Azerbaijan and visited Washington, D.C., and with the U.S. facilitation, managed to get a peace deal with Armenia done. In that sense, yes, there is timing matters. Timing matters in terms of also geopolitics. Whether or not Azerbaijan's State Security Service made a statement quite after, very shortly after VP Vance's visit, I don't know, but at least there was a huge political, domestic and public interest to this developments, which had been known already for a couple of months. But again, as I told earlier, this issue has a very strong geopolitical aspect.
And looking ahead, what do you think will be the most important in maintaining internal stability while managing this complex regional and international relationship, or relations rather?
I mean, since restoring national independence in 1991, all domestic upheavals in Azerbaijan, all domestic problems in Azerbaijan was linked to some foreign involvement. Therefore, while we are talking about domestic stability, I would say most of the challenges, most of the risks, and of course, all those are related to geopolitical events. Let's remember that the October 1994 coup d'etat attempt happened only 2 weeks after Azerbaijan signed a contract of the century relating involving Western oil multinational companies, and I mean, in that sense, domestic stability and foreign involvement are quite related. What it means for domestic stability, I mean, our security agencies, I should congratulate them. They have been quite successful in thwarting this threat. Whether it stops there, I cannot say this, of course, but to that extent, I'm confident that, and without, of course, underestimating the threats, I'm confident that Azerbaijan's security establishment is able to counter those threats. As for geopolitical aspects, we have already been able to mitigate this threat, which was designed to prevent Azerbaijan from what is doing now, namely pursuing the agenda of peace, pursuing closer relationship with the Turkic countries, and creating a area of cooperation in the heart of Asia along the Middle Corridor. We are going to, nothing will deter us from this course, because it's something in interest, in our national interest, and I would argue it's in the interest of most of the countries in the region.
Mr. Mammadov, thank you for your analysis today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.
You're up to date with world news for the hour. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned to A News.